What are your salary expectations on the job? Stay tuned. Welcome to the Shut Up and Work podcast. I am the host, the coach. Along with me today is SJ. And SJ, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good, thanks. How are you doing, coach?
Oh, I'm doing great. And today we're going to talk about
Salary expectations.
that's right. What do you expect to get out of your salary at your current job or maybe the job that you're or about to start? How about that? So, with that being said, let's jump right into it. SJ, you got the mic. Go ahead.
Thanks, coach. So, it's a competitive job market out here, and you got to stay looking and hunting, always on the hunt for the next job. And I'm just curious, and I'd love to talk about what are your salary expectations and where are you getting those expectations from? What are you looking at to decide I should be paid this amount for this job? Because a lot of employers do not post the salary that they're going to pay for the position that they list. And I was even reading an article just last week that said that a lot of employers are now posting a salary range that will be anywhere from like 20 to $40,000. So that's a really big difference. And the reason that they're doing that is so that they can pull in more people who are attracted to the job. And then once they get you interviewing 2 or 3 times and you're hooked and you're really ready for this job, they'll lowball you and offer you the lower salary.
Mm.
So that's just something that I wanted to talk about today. I also wanted to talk about how some of the younger generations are, getting paid more and how it is that they're doing those things. And then we'll wrap up just by saying, first of all, let me say this instead of wrapping with it. In my opinion, everybody should be negotiating their salary. There are
Great
very
point.
few situations where you should just accept the money that is offered to you. And I know that that can be a tough thing to do, but I learned that on my very first job. We had a manager, a site manager, and my fellow coworkers let me know early on that he does not give anybody a raise unless they come and ask for it. And although it seemed like a bit of a power trip, I also recognized the fact that he was really grooming us for our careers so that we would be able to approach people to ask for more money when the time was right. So, coach, what do you think about that? What do you think about setting your salary expectations or, if they're too high and they're unreasonable, and a lot of times they're too low because we're in positions where we just need to get that next paycheck?
Well, I think a quick story or my experience of what happened is back in 2009, I was working for the regular department of the Army as a civil servant. And of course, anybody that knows about civil servants, you work on what they call a GS pay schedule, or it's called general schedule in that. And then you can be like a GS7, a GS9, or a GS11, anything in that range. Well, at that time, I was like a GS9 in San Antonio, Texas, and my pay was around $48,000. So I had been told by a supervisor from the Army Corps of Engineers that he had hired me for a GS 11 position to come and work for the Army Corps of Engineers as a quality assurance rep or a construction inspector. And with that, they were on the Army Corps of Engineers, they were on what they called the NSPS system, which is no longer available, but they were trying it out during this time. Somebody in the federal government said that non-appropriated positions, they could go on this different pay schedule. And with this pay schedule on this NSPS, which stood for National Security Personnel System, you had those pay bands that you were kind of describing there a moment ago. Whereas for the starting position, let's say like the starting pay was $50,000, and that was like pay band one. And then pay band 2, it will be like $60,000. And then pay band 3 will be like 65 or $70,000, and pay band 4 will be like $80,000. So with that being said, what I did, I went over to the new supervisor and I asked him, I said, okay, for the people that you've been hiring in to come work in your department, what is the starting salary? What have you been hiring them on? And he told me, he said, everybody that I've hired in is coming in at $75,000. So, you know me, I jumped up like the Toyota commercial.
Oh, what a feeling.
So when the HR department called me back to negotiate the salary, I was like 75. And then they were telling me,
Oh, Lord, that's too high and this and that. And
started making these excuses. And they were like,
well, how about we start you out at 50?
and I was like, 50? I was like, I'm making 48. So damn, can a brother get a raise? So then I told him, I said, okay, how about around 72 or 71,000? And they were kind of like,
Oh,
so for the people out there, you kind of getting a point. This is kind of like haggling type of thing that was going on. So then they countered back with like 55. I countered back with like 68. Then they countered again with like 58. And then I countered back with 65. And then finally they told me,
well, the highest we can give you, sir, for this position is 61,000.
and they was like,
If we have to go higher than that, we would have to get like President Obama or somebody on the chief of staff to sign off on it, and then you may not get the position.
and so I
Wow.
caved in and I went on and took the $61,000 to only come and find out later that I end up losing in the long run, because within a year, they went back to the regular GS system. And while all my other peers who had gotten over $70,000 coming in, they got a higher ranking on the GS system. They got ranked higher on the scale and got bigger step increases than what I received in that situation. So I ended up losing in that whole situation and ordeal. So I'm kind of, if you are an experienced person, I'm kind of going to tell you to go for yours. Try to knock it out the park. Knock that shit out the parking lot. I mean, if you step up the bat, send that ball flying out of the stadium. If you're a new worker, I would maybe say, maybe try to negotiate maybe a few thousand more dollars more than what the lowest offer is. So that's my take on it.
Okay. Okay. Well, as always, I see many different sides. I try to remain objective. And I definitely think that that is a smart thing to do. But a couple of other things that I would recommend is one, when you hear about jobs that are paying a certain amount, that's always a good place to start. And that's amount that you like to hear. And that could be in different industries, right? But the other thing is too, you need to educate yourself about pay. I am all for pay transparency. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to tell people exactly how much you make, but for a long time now, many years, decades even, for as long as I've been working, employers have been trying to make employees feel uncomfortable about discussing pay. They've said that it's illegal.
Yep.
They've said that it's against policy. You could be fired for it. But I honestly believe that the reason that they're doing that is because of the unfair ways that they're practicing their pay scale.
Yes.
So we have to do it in a discreet manner. The first thing that you should do to discuss pay is, instead of giving a specific amount, just give a salary range. And that way things can be fair for everybody. And as much as I hate to say this, some people are going to be better advocates for themselves than other people are. Some people are assertive and they have no problems getting in there and learning to do this. Like I said, this is something that I learned early on. But something also that I've noticed is that people are picking these numbers out of thin air. they're saying that they want to make a certain amount of money
Mhm.
because they want to have this lifestyle. Of course, when you look on social media, everybody has the six-figure lifestyle, right?
Right.
It's everybody's goal to make six figures, but you have to keep in mind that 18% of Americans, 18% of Americans make more than $100,000 a year.
Right.
And, it takes a certain type of job to make that type of money. It would be very difficult, for example, to make six figures a year as a teacher.
Exactly.
Now, there are some instances that you will be able to do that, but it's not going to be just a straightforward, I'm a teacher working in a school. You're probably going to have to get into administration.
Yep.
You're probably going to have to have some years, some experience, and education.
Mhm.
And all of those things matter. Now, one thing that I'm not talking about today, we're not really talking about entrepreneurship, and we're not talking about multiple streams of income.
Exactly.
Both of those are great. And if you're into that, then I applaud you. But right now, I just want to talk about some of us working stiffs like me who get a job and have a salary. And so, of
Yes.
course, we want to maximize that salary as much as possible. So, again, the first thing that you want to do is educate yourself.
Mhm.
How much does this position pay? And if the employer or prospective employer doesn't want to tell you, reach out on LinkedIn, talk to some employees, talk to some former employees, do
Mhm.
a search online. You can use sites like Glassdoor and PayScale, but you can talk to individuals as well. This is what LinkedIn is for.
Right.
Reach out to people who are out there, make a network and exchange information so that you have an idea. But I will say this, in my experience, even looking at, because of the field that I'm in, the
Mhm.
titles don't always translate. Everybody doesn't know what my title means because you have directors in every field, right? In operations,
Yes.
in hotel and the service industry and so forth. So that doesn't always translate. So it's a good idea to know. One thing I like to do is, of course, I always want to increase my salary when I move on to the next job because it's been such a slow incremental increase over the years. But I have to take into consideration too, what am I bringing to the table? And now that I have years of experience behind me, in addition to education and furthering my education, that's got to be worth something as well.
Yes. And
So
that's a great points. Great points that you're bringing up. Keep going.
thanks, coach. So then the next thing I want you to consider is, what does it take to maintain your lifestyle? Like, I'll admit to you guys, I made a little mistake. I got a little excited about a salary that I was being offered that was in a city 2 hours away from where I lived and grew up. Now, I've moved to other areas, but they had a similar cost of living. Well, I moved to this beach town. And all of a sudden, after I accepted the job with a salary that I was happy with, that salary did not stretch like it was supposed to. It actually put me in a deficit because I hadn't yet looked up the cost of living in the city. I just assumed that because, oh, this is a smaller town than what I'm used to, this is not a big major city, and so forth, that the cost of living would be similar. Well, it's not. It's extremely higher. So now I had a salary that I initially was happy with, but when applying it to the cost of living here, and I mean everything is higher here. The living, the gas, the groceries, the
Mm.
entertainment, and there are less options, and it's a smaller city. So I can't drive around just to see what the better deal is because oftentimes, unless I leave the city, I have to work with what I've got here. So that's something that you want to consider as well, especially when you're moving. And some of you guys may know this stuff already, but I think it's a good refresher just in case you don't know it. Third, stop looking at these influencers on social media, please, because how many times do we have to say that, social media is a highlight reel?
Yes.
Everybody is not going to be honest. And what you're seeing may look like instant success, or it may look like somebody just popped off immediately, but we really don't know how long, unless they tell us they've been working behind the scenes. And I'm sorry, but we really don't know if they're being honest either.
Right. And that's
So
a great
that's something
point.
else that we need to take into consideration.
Yes. And going back, what was you saying? You were talking about number two, considering where you live. That's another great point because another mistake I made when I first went into civil service back in 2004 timeframe, late 2004, I was influenced by my parents. They were just happy, like,
Hey, you're going in the civil service, you did your years in the military, and you can still tack on your years with civil service. You can combine it with the military.
which is what I did, and it still counts, So instead of you starting all over, if you did 4 years in the military and then you got hired in civil service, instead of you starting over year one in civil service, you would be at your fifth year, because those years that you served on active duty counts towards your civil service. So that was huge, because that automatically gave you a certain amount of leave hours, annual leave hours, that gave you an amount of sick leave hours in that situation. So it was very huge. And instead of, like you were saying, SJ, looking at, hey, I'm moving to a different city. How much does it cost to live there? How much is car insurance? How much is gas? How much is, to rent an apartment or to buy a house? And my first few years here, I started off in debt, because I was thinking that, hey, 40,000 was going to go a long way in this city, because I'm coming out of the military, which at that time I wasn't getting paid nothing. If you take away the housing, my food costs, which the military will give you a substance allowance for that, and pay for your housing. My base pay, I wasn't making anything. And then I come out here, and then I was trying to have to get on my feet, learn how to budget and do things in that situation that you were just stating. And I started out in a deficit at first, until finally, around 2009, when I got on with the Corps, I was able to get on my feet and get my budget right and start saving money and putting money in the bank and paying off bills and things like that in that situation. So I definitely know where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned some great points too, because something I want you all to consider when you're negotiating your salary, just sharpen your skills. It's not all about them, it's about you too. You add value to this company. Otherwise, they wouldn't be seeking you, they wouldn't be trying to hire you. So maybe you can't get the money that you want, but there are a lot of other things that you can negotiate about. You can negotiate about your schedule. I personally prefer a flex schedule.
Mhm.
So maybe if you can't give me the money I want, can you be a little flexible about what time it is I'm going to come in? Instead of saying I need to be there at 8 o'clock sharp, maybe I want to come in between 9 and 10. That
Right.
way I know that I'm never going to be late.
Right.
Right. Maybe I want a guarantee that I will be able to take all of my PTO within, let's say I get 2 weeks of PTO per year. I want to take that in one lump sum, because sometimes that can be difficult.
Right.
Maybe you want to negotiate the fact that they're going to pay for you to get certain certificates or add more education, or that you're going to be able to move up within the company within a certain amount of time, get training for that. And then also you can ask for more money on the back end, ask for bonuses, ask for a salary review, ask for an increase after 6 months of performance, 9 months of performance, after you've been there for a certain amount of time. But the point is, you've got to go in there and ask. And that's something that now I'm going to start talking about generations,
Uh,
right? Because you and I were both raised, my parents were of the same mindset. Like, you got to get in there and work, and you're lucky to get something good, and you need to do what you need to do to make that work out. You need stability. And I have that mindset, but I'm going to admit that mindset has held me back in a
yes.
lot of ways. I've
Yes.
erred too much on the side of being humble. We can take a lesson from the millennials, because the millennials, sometimes we call them entitled. Sometimes we say that, they're out of hand and we don't think of too many good things about them. But millennials earn more money than any other generation has at their age. And the reason that they're able to do that is because they haven't let things hold them back. right? Their parents raise them to think that they can have everything that they want. I'm going to
Right.
let you decide for yourself if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I
But
know.
like most things, there are pros and cons. So the good thing is that they're going out there, they're getting jobs, they're asking for what they want. And sometimes those jobs are not even what are posted, but they can change. You can ask. I have asked on job interviews, what would you think about changing the title from this to this? Meaning that there's going to be an opportunity for growth in there, or because I'm more experienced than the candidate that you're requiring, then maybe I should have a bump up. Even if you're not able to do the salary right now, I would like to have this title. And if I can't have this title at this time, then I would like to have this title within a year.
Yeah. Great.
And just negotiate. You've got to ask for what you want, but it needs to be based on something concrete. It can't just be because you want it. Well, I mean, I guess it can be, but that doesn't make sense to me.
Right. Right. And no,
I feel like you've got to take a logical approach. You've got to be professional. And, also the joke goes even further because now we have the generation after the millennials. And the joke with them is, oh, well, they're just not going to work, but they're also still living with their parents.
Yep.
Sometimes they don't want to leave the nest whatsoever at all. They just want to stay in the nest and they're going to grow up while their parents grow old. That's your business. I'm not talking about that today. I'm simply trying to talk about some of the things that I've learned over the years and some of the things that I'm still continuing to work at this level in my career.
Yeah, and you definitely bring up some great points. And I guess since I've now have been out the workforce, I'm going on year 2 here working on that. I wonder how it is because in civil service jobs, normally you have majority of the workforce is older. And so when I was in it, you had the baby boomers. They made up probably 70% of the workforce. And the sad part is, in a lot of civil service jobs, they were kind of reluctant in hiring younger people who were right out of college. I mean, if they could hire this person who had 20, 25, 30, 35 years of experience, that was the person they were going for. They wouldn't go for, the person fresh out of college. And if the person, especially with the Army Corps of Engineers, if they did hire somebody fresh out of college, they were an intern. And that intern, it could go either way. They could get rid of that intern at any time and don't have to hire them, or they can keep them on and make them permanent. So you bring up some excellent points. So my dealings were mostly with baby boomers and Generation X, which is what me and you are. That was most of my dealings in the workforce. We had a small, very small, I will say maybe 5% or less that were millennials or younger before I left the workforce.
Coach, that is ever changing.
Yes.
So my experience right now is that, when I first started my career, it was the same thing. It
Mhm.
was mostly baby boomers. Everybody was almost old enough to be my parent. And then I was the youngest one in the workforce. And
Yes.
that was its own interesting situation right there because I want to go in and be respected as a professional. So I'm not going to call you Mr. John and Miss Sally. Plus, I
Right.
wasn't even raised to do that. My parents didn't play that. I had to call you Mr. and Miss last name. We weren't using any first names in our household. But that's an aside. But at the same time, I did want to be respectful because I wanted respect in return. So nowadays, what I see in my field, and not just at the job that I'm at now, but in the last couple of jobs, is that things have shifted a little bit. A lot of places are hiring younger because they don't want to pay for experience anymore. They want to
good.
get somebody in that they can train to do things the way they like to do it within their corporate culture.
Uh-huh.
But also, they don't have to pay for that experience. But it's really interesting too, because some of these people who are coming in straight out of college without any experience are getting a much higher salary than I would have expected. They're not being lowballed as much, but they're getting tricked into contracts as well. And then in addition to that, they're doing multiple responsibilities. That's something that I definitely want to talk about in a future podcast, this silent hiring epidemic where you get hired for one job, but by the time you get trained and up and running, before you know it, somebody has left, or the 2 positions or 3 positions have been consolidated. So
Mhm.
you're actually doing the role of 2 or 3 people, but you're only getting paid one salary. So even if you started with that salary thinking, oh, this is great, this is way more than I thought I would get paid on my first job. They're burning you out. They're exhausting you. They're stressing you out. And it's up to you to decide, is it worth it so that you can make the money? By the end of all of that, a lot of times the feeling is no.
Got it.
So there are so many things to consider. And I'll tell you a little story, actually. My first full-time job. So I started my career and I was working freelance, but it was very stable freelance. I was working 40 hours a week. I knew how much I was going to get paid. I knew exactly when I was going to work. They were simply using the term freelance or putting us in that category so that they didn't have to pay us any benefits.
Got it.
But it was in my chosen field. I was working professionally. I was getting paid above minimum wage. So all of this seemed great at the time. But, here is my family.
You need benefits. You need more stability. You need a full-time job.
And, I wish that I had pushed back a little bit more, but that's neither here nor there. What if doesn't really help us too much. But there are just so many different things to consider. And I think that the younger generations are really good at doing that. They're good at pushing boundaries and asking for what they want. And maybe I need to I definitely am working on getting more on board with that, because even in the question that I'm asking today, what
Mhm.
are your salary expectations and why? I'm kind of turning up my nose at somebody who says, I want to make $70,000 because I'm worth it. This isn't a L'Oreal commercial. You can't just say you're worth it. What makes you worth $70,000? Not everybody. I know that education at this point is still a privilege in this country, unfortunately.
Mhm.
But you've got to be competitive. What is it that you're doing? What is it that you're bringing to this job other than an education that's required? So all of the candidates have it. And it could be transferable skills. It could be anything, but the important thing is we are no longer in the day and age. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care about the employer. I don't care about the quote work family. All these companies want to say that they're like a family. They push this culture that they're so great, they're so caring, they're so wonderful. Yet all around me, me and all of my friends are seeing the same trends. And that's why everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, like
Yeah.
you said, and free themselves from all of these traps and all of these binds and all of the foolishness that you have to go through when you work for somebody else.
Great point.
So you might put yourself first, be selfish,
Mhm.
educate yourself, arm yourself, and get comfortable advocating for yourself so that you can make what you want to make and make at the very least what you're worth, if not more. And isn't it funny that sometimes it seems like the people who deserve it the least are getting paid the most because
Yep.
they have a good mouthpiece. They know how to talk themselves up
Mhm.
and talk themselves into these positions. That's a whole other story. Very interesting, though.
Yeah, we can talk about that at another future segment, but you hit the nail on the head. And what you just said in that last few sentences there is basically what I was going to say, to wrap things up and say that is that, hey, go out there and just shoot for it. Just shoot for the stars. And as I said earlier, when that fastball or that meat pitch comes across the plate, try to smash it out the park, smash it into another area code or whatever. Hit it as hard as you can and see what happens. It doesn't hurt anything, right? Only thing they can tell you is no.
Absolutely. And no is not the worst thing in the world.
That's right. Well, some people, I guess, depending on how you was raised.
Well, all of you out there who think that no is the end of the world, get over it. It is a new
Exactly.
world. No
Exactly.
is just one more step that you need to take to get what you want. Because if you don't go after what you want, nobody's going to hand it to you in this world.
Exactly. So do we have anything else on this topic?
I think that we're going to have to continue going on this topic because I want everybody out there to be able to live a happy life, and we need resources in order to do that. We need money. That's just a fact. So I want to continue to talk about this. I want to promote salary transparency because it's the thing that's going to keep things the most fair for all of us.
So with that, we're not going to shut up on it. I know that came before the drum roll, but it's all right. We're going to keep working on it and keep pressing this topic as time goes on. And as you said, SJ, the more and more information that we gather and learn about this topic, we're going to bring it back up and educate the people out there that is listening to us. So with that being said, one last thing I would like everybody to do that is listening to us. We are very grateful for that, and we thank y'all and commend y'all. But we also need you guys to go out there and like, share, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification on the subscribe. Hit that little bell so that every time we post up a new video, you guys will get the notification. And it helps the algorithm for this channel and helps us grow and reach more people out there who may have these questions or inquiries while they're still out there working on the job. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening to the Shut Up and Work podcast. Take care.